Edward Jenner invented the smallpox vaccine in 1796 when he cultivated cowpox, which he provided in small doses to people to successfully immunize them against smallpox. That's my fact.
So
And he was
smallpox, cowpox.
Edward Jenner
Yeah.
invented the smallpox vaccine in 1796.
Yeah.
That's my fact.
You see, one of our subscribers and listeners on Spotify, Michelle.
Yeah.
I mentioned, because she's a big fan, and we're in the office today, and I mentioned to her we're doing diseases. And she sent me a link on smallpox, and I just didn't look at it.
You see, you should have. Yeah, you should have. Michelle's trying to help you, and yet.
I know. So sorry, Michelle. So I don't know, but what I do know is the crux of the matter that she was trying to explain to me over lunch was that it was given by accident to a little boy.
I mean, essentially what he did was, so he took cow scabs from cowpoxes off their bodies, and he used the kind of goo. He'd cut the skin, and he'd use the goo from the scab, and that then obviously would infect people with a kind of a pox that was so close to smallpox that it ultimately worked as a kind of a vaccine. And it worked so well, it was eventually, a couple hundred years later, the WHO turned it into the world's first major vaccine drive and vaccinated basically the whole world, and now we don't have smallpox anymore. Humanity's only eradicated 2 illnesses, smallpox and rinderpest. So and it sort of started, if you believe my fact, it started with Edward Jenner.
With the cows.
Yeah, with Edward Jenner and the cows in 1796 of all places.
My word. I'm going to have to say definitely. I think cow diseases have been really a big issue in mankind. And so if they're ill, and around that time, science and technology and medicine, it had all begun. The scientific method had begun. And so I'll have to say your fact is true.
So, the interesting thing is what story that I just told you now is the widely held, accepted in the medical community development story for the smallpox vaccine. Edward Jenner is credited in history and on Wikipedia as being...
Was he a medical person?
Yeah.
And he was trying to fix cowpox.
100%. And he's fixed smallpox, and he's 100% credited as being the inventor of the smallpox vaccine. But here is where it gets interesting, because the fact is actually false. He didn't invent the smallpox vaccine, because the first clear reference to a smallpox vaccine was made by Chinese author Wan Chan.
See.
In 1499. He lived 1499 to 1582. In his book published in 1549 called The Du Zhen Jing Fa. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. So sometime around the 1500s, there was smallpox vaccinations.
Good grief.
Yeah, and what they did was they took powdered smallpox scabs and they blew them up the noses of healthy people, which would then kill kind of as many as 2% of those people. But that was significantly lower than the 20 to 30% mortality rate if you actually caught smallpox. So the Chinese have been doing that for ages. There's 2 reports on the Chinese practice of inoculation, which were received by the Royal Society in London in 1700. So this is before Edward Jenner. One by Dr. Martin Lister, who received a report by an employee of the East India Company stationed in China. And another, according to Voltaire, who in 1742 said the Turks derived their use of inoculation from neighboring Circassia. He didn't speculate on where the Circassians got their technique from, though he did report that the Chinese have practiced this for hundreds of years. So, actually, the Chinese had found a vaccination system for smallpox long before Edward Jenner, the alleged inventor of the smallpox vaccine. So there is a widely held belief that we can basically put to bed.
But how's that method, eh?
Yeah.
Blowing it up their nose.
What a vaccine essentially is
a bit of the disease.
What it used to be Yeah, it was taking a little piece of the disease
Yes.
and giving somebody a tiny little dose so that the body could
React.
could react to it,
Yeah.
discover it, react to it, and destroy it before it took over the body. And then we got a lot smarter as vaccines kind of developed. We started going, well, we don't have to give them the bad part of the vaccine. We just need to give them a piece of the virus that's unique to that particular virus. So the body then recognizes that uniqueness as being a thing, and that's as being dangerous to the body, rather than necessarily recognizing that the whole virus. So now we don't have to put the actual deadly part of the virus into you. We just give a tiny piece of the virus. And and then that's now what's recognized in the vaccines. So their systems were extremely simplistic, but they were
Wow.
essentially vaccinations.
That's amazing.
Yeah.